and I know a number. Thank you, Bryn. And I know another of number of folks, yeah, I connected with at FCSSA had mentioned that they would probably register for this session, but they weren't able to join. And so that's why we are recording today's session. So you probably just got that notification pop up on your screen. If you're not comfortable at all, having your video on while you're asking a question, feel free to turn it off, or you can put the question in the chat. There will be some opportunities or many opportunities today to ask questions. We're going to try and get through as much of the content at first, and then we'll pause for questions because there's quite a bit to go through. But first, before we get started, I did just want to take a moment to do a land acknowledgement, and I'd like to just acknowledge that our organization's physical office is located in Amiskwatis, Wisconsin, which is also known as Beaver Hills House or Edmonton. And we are located on the traditional territories of Treaty 6 and within the Métis Nation homeland, specifically the Fort Edmonton Métis District, as well as the Edmonton Whitemud Métis District. And I'd just like to thank our hosts, the Nahiawa Cree, the Dene, the Niitsitapi Blackfoot, the Saulteaux, the Métis, and Nakota Sioux, and many others whose traditional lands we stand upon today. Several years ago, our organization made an intentional commitment to reconciliation. And as a non-Indigenous organization, I think it's really important to reaffirm my personal and our organization's commitment to reconciliation through our organization's initiatives, as houselessness is disproportionately impacting Indigenous peoples and nations across Turtle Island as a result of colonization. As I've learned from several elders, the word homelessness does not exist in many Indigenous languages. As a team, we aim to develop culturally appropriate tools and resources in collaboration with Indigenous peoples, support for Indigenous by Indigenous projects and solutions, as well as seek new and improved ways to administer the Reaching Homes federal homelessness funding in order for funding to benefit more Indigenous nations. Together, our team is committed to practicing humility as we learn and unlearn about the history and legacy of colonization across Turtle Island and aim to continue building and strengthen relationships with nations not only in Alberta, but across Turtle Island. So thank you. I think it's really important to do that acknowledgement as a non-Indigenous organization that is delivering funding to not only rural remote, but also First Nations, Métis settlement, and Métis communities here in Alberta. If we do have Indigenous communities or organizations on the call, we did host a information session this morning specifically about the Indigenous project application guide and the process, because we do offer a slightly different process for Indigenous communities to apply for Reaching Home funding. And so if you are interested at all in seeing or getting a recording of that session because you weren't able to attend, just let us know and we can make sure you get a copy of it. Today's session is going to be focused on the general application. So for new projects who are not Indigenous led organizations or communities. And then we're also going to be talking about, and I know there's a number of you on the call, current Reaching Home projects. So projects that are currently receiving funding and just the slightly different application process we offer for those communities because you've applied for funding in the past. So with that being said, and sorry, I probably should have started off with this, but just wanted to do quick introductions. There's just a couple of us from RDN on the call today. Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Stenikis. I'm the Director of Homelessness Initiatives with RDN. I've been with the organization now for about 5.5 years, overseeing the Reaching Home program. And I'm joined by my lovely colleague today, Bryn, who I'll let introduce herself, and she's going to be leading most of today's session.
Thank you so much, Sydney. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see some familiar faces as well as some new faces. My name is Bryn. I am the program coordinator here at the Rural Development Network for the Reaching Home program. I work alongside Sydney and a few other individuals with the Reaching Home program. I'm the person where typically if you're sending an email to our RH applications or our other Reaching Home emails, I'm the person on the other end of it a lot of the time. So if you ever have any questions, I am the lady to look for. But yeah, it's really great to see everyone, and I'm really excited to just chat a little bit further today, learn about more of your projects, and yeah, get things underway. And then Sydney, did you want me to go straight into the application guide? Sorry, or were you wanting to say anything else? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah, feel free to go right into the application guide and yeah, provide kind of an overview. And then yeah, you can pass things back to me once we get to the current project section.
Okay, Perfect. Sorry about that. I'm just going to get my screen all set up for you guys, and then we should be good to go. Well, and I hope everyone can see my screen okay. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. Um, But on the screen, you should be able to see now the 2026 to 2028 Reaching Home application guide. So this is for both general and current projects. If you are an Indigenous project, as Sydney was mentioning, we do have a separate guide specifically for you that you are also able to access. This guide can be found along with the Indigenous guide and a lot of other key tools on our website. So if you just go to the call for proposals section, you should be able to find everything there, just so everyone's aware. But yeah. To get things started, we're just kind of going to go through the guide. We're going to start with a few key details right at the very beginning, just so everybody is up to speed. And then, yeah, we'll just go from there. So as you guys can see, obviously this is the application guide. We're going to start off with a table of contents. So if you are reviewing it, really key area here. If you're looking to jump to something specific, you can definitely use that. And then next up, we have the land acknowledgement. Sydney obviously already did one today, so we will just go past this right now. And then we get into the key information section, sorry. This is another new addition to the guide this year. Basically really nice area that just kind of goes through all of the really high points of the guide. Definitely still recommend reviewing the whole guide. However, this is a really good, just kind of little snapshot into a lot of the key details that we're gonna look at today. So to get started, I guess the best way to do it is look at this key information. So the very first part that's brought up in the guide is just where to apply. So in order to apply for the Reaching Home Call for Proposals for 2026 to 2028, you are going to be going to our Google form. In order to get there, you can either access our website and you can directly be linked to the application from there. Or if you're in the guide here, you can actually just click this hyperlink here and it'll take you directly to the guide. It is a Google form, so something I just like to make sure that I mention at the beginning is the fact that in order to submit an application, you do need to use a Google email, like you need to use a Gmail in order to be able to submit the application. With that said, when you are submitting your application, there's actually contact information that you're able to fill in at the very beginning. So if you are using a personal email or it's not the preferred email that you would like to be contacted with, don't worry. The application email that you submit through won't be the one that we're reaching out to. It will be the contact emails that are later filled in within the application. If you do see any issues with using a Gmail account because it's not a work account and you have any issues there, please definitely let us know if you guys have any issues with that, security reasons or whatever else it may be. If you guys are not comfortable, definitely link in with us at our RH applications email, and we can chat a bit further and see if we can come to a solution for everyone that everyone feels comfortable with. But yeah, that's basically the application. So like I said, just click there or go to our website in order to find it. Next important thing that I would like to chat about is the application deadline. So we are just under a week away from applications being due, December 8th, that's Monday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So I really just want to stress that it is at 1 o'clock. I know it's a little bit of a different time. It's not the end of the day. It is midday. So just make sure that you have your application submitted by then. Definitely earlier is always better in case you do ever run into any technical difficulties or anything like that with the form and just the way the internet is. I'm by no means the most technical lady around, so I always like to recommend applying early in case you do run into any issues with that. Yeah. Next important thing to chat about is the total available funding. So for this year's cycle for 2026 to 2028, the total available funding is going to be $4.8 million. That breaks out to about $2.4 million every year in project funding that we will be able to dole out amongst successful projects. This year, another new thing that has come about is the maximum project funding request. So if you've applied for funding in the past for Reaching Home through the Rural Development Network, or you've been successful in receiving funding, you might notice that this is a little bit different. So in previous years, we had allowed projects to request as much funding as they would like to receive. However, based off of discussions with our regional advisory board and what they had come to the decision around, we decided to move forward with putting a maximum request amount into the application for this year. So that maximum request amount is $100,000 per year or $200,000 over a 2-year funding cycle if you guys are applying for 2026 to 2028 and you're doing a multi-year project. The reason for this is largely because in previous years, when we had done applications and we had kept it very open and let projects apply for as much as they want, we found that we were having to trim budgets too much in order to disperse the funding as much as the RAB was looking for. So when that was happening, basically projects were requesting maybe $300,000 for a project. And then after talking with the RAB and they wanted to proceed with the project, the regional advisory board was only able to budget, let's say, $60,000 for the project. So obviously that's quite a big discrepancy between what $300,000 and the original request is and the $60,000 to be approved. So we just wanted to hopefully fix that issue a little bit and not cause any major project trimming to have to happen this year so that projects aren't totally changing. Because obviously, if you're applying for a $300,000 project and you're only getting 60, likely a lot of things are being cut and the project isn't really going to look the exact same way as what you had originally applied for. So that was a big reason there basically for the changing with the funding down to $100,000 a year. With that said, I think it's also important to note that just because we do have the maximum set at $100,000 a year or $200,000 over the 2 years, it's not guaranteed. So you may apply for the $100,000 and you still might end up in a situation where maybe you are only approved for 60,000 or 40,000 or whatever the ultimate decision is, depending on what total requests are and how many projects and everything apply. So just know that there still may be a need for budget trimming. However, with this reduced amount, we're just hoping that it isn't something that's going to totally change the scope of everyone's projects when they are applying and hopefully being successful. So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there. Also, because there is a maximum, I don't want anyone to think that they have to apply for the full maximum. If you really have a project that only costs $60,000 a year, you're just looking to cover one person's wage or whatever that might be, nobody's gonna look at you more frowned upon on the fact that you didn't request the full amount. That won't be taken into consideration at all when we are looking at approving or disapproving projects. So yeah, just kind of wanted to touch on that really quick because it is something that's a little bit different. But hopefully, like I said, it's hopefully beneficial for everyone involved by having this maximum this year. Next thing to touch on, so with reaching home funding, project types we're able to fund either operational or capital. With that said, capital projects are not eligible to also receive operational funding. So a big component, we're going to discuss this a little bit later, of the capital projects is a sustainability plan. And essentially that just means that you're able to show that if we are funding you for a capital project, that you are able to sustain the operations of that project for 5 years following the completion of reaching home funding. Sydney will go into this a little bit more later because she's the expert in that, but just wanted to put that out there right away just so everybody had that in their heads. Next up, the earliest project start date. Okay, so projects will have to start at the earliest, April 1st, 2026, and at the latest they will be able to complete is March 31st, 2028. That April 1st, 2026 is important because we aren't able to retroactively apply any of this funding to anything that occurs before April 1st, 2026. So unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to submit any expenses if you are approved for like January 2026. Anything that you are submitting for will have to occur on or after April 1st of 2026. And then the same thing with the latest project completion date. You won't be eligible to submit any project activities that occur after March 31st, 2028 during this cycle of funding. So the whole money has to be used between April 1st, 2026 and March 31st, 2028. For eligible applicants, basically anyone in Alberta is eligible to apply for this funding as long as they fall outside of the 7 major cities. So the 7 major cities, for anyone who isn't familiar, are Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grande Prairie, Medicine Hat, and Fort McMurray. Rural, remote, First Nations, Métis settlements, Métis communities, and on-reserve projects are all eligible through this Reaching Home funding, just so everybody is aware. Priority. Okay, so the next important thing that the Regional Advisory Board decided to implement this year was physically stating that they do have a priority for this funding this year. And the main priority that they are focusing on is projects that are Indigenous led and or Indigenous serving. So with that said, later on when we go through the application, there's going to be a reconciliation question that you guys are going to have to answer as part of the application. And basically it's just showing, regardless of if you are an Indigenous organization or not, the work that you're doing essentially to aid in helping any Indigenous members who are suffering from houselessness. Just so everybody is aware, and I'm sure most people on this call, because we are all providers in the sector, obviously, Indigenous members are disproportionately affected by houselessness. So that is a large reason for the Regional Advisory Board's commitment to this for this funding cycle. Next up, eligible activities. So a really key thing that I should mention here is with Reaching Home funding, it's not just considered a low income funding stream. Essentially, with Reaching Home, it is supposed to go towards strictly people who are either homeless or at imminent risk of facing homelessness. So that is a really key detail. I know that sometimes that gets a little bit lost in communication. So I just want to make sure that we stress that any funding that is going out the door for Reaching Home, it does need to be addressing those specific vulnerable populations. It's not just a low income support funding stream. Obviously, you guys are aware of the general information session and the Indigenous information session dates. This is the very last information session that we will be holding for the Reaching Home applications for 2026 to 2028. If you weren't able to attend, like Sydney was mentioning, the Indigenous information session earlier today, and you would like to get a copy of that recording, you can definitely let us know and we can share that with you. If there's anyone who you were hoping to attend today that wasn't able to attend in your organization, we will also be sending out a recording from this session to everyone who enrolled in today's session or showed up. So just so everybody is aware of that. Next important thing is contact information. So if you guys have any issues or there's any questions you have regarding your applications or anything that comes up, this email right here, rhapplications@ruraldevelopment.ca, is going to be your lifeline. Please use it. Myself and a few others all monitor this email. I am the main point of contact there. However, there are a few other eyes and things in there. It's just a little bit more empty. So we always ask that you send any of your questions there because they are able to be screened and responded to a lot quicker than reaching out to anyone else. So definitely recommend using that email if you guys have any questions regarding your application or run into any issues while you're submitting. Funding decisions and notification. So just so everybody is aware, we will be meeting with our regional advisory board, who are the members who make the decisions essentially for who is eligible to receive or not receive the Reaching Home funding for this next cycle. We'll be meeting with them in early 2026. And then notifications for successful applicants will be going out in early February 2026. So just so everybody is aware of that big date. But yeah, these are really the key high points that we take away from the whole guide. So I just wanted to make sure that we touched on all of these first, but I am going to finish going through the guide now and just kind of touching on any other points that might have been missed here. So obviously we should be good for the overview of the Reaching Home call for proposals, but by all means, if you guys would like to read that on your own time, I definitely recommend it. Okay, so who's eligible to apply? Not-for-profits, for-profits, municipalities, public health and educational institutions, provincial and territorial governments, and Indigenous organizations are all eligible to apply for the Reaching Home funding. When it comes to activities and priorities for what's eligible, it's really important in your applications that you guys are expressing and able to address a demonstrated need in the community. We also want to make sure that you guys are able to outline capacity in order to deliver your identified project activities. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on this later when we talk about reporting requirements, but just so everybody is aware, Reaching Home is a reimbursement funding stream in opposed to a typical grant where you receive funding right away when you are successful. So with that said, there's just a bit extra reporting that is required through this funding than in a typical grant. So we like to make sure that we're able to assess projects and make sure that they have the capacity in order to properly administer this funding, essentially. With that said, it's also important to demonstrate any innovative approaches for how one might end homelessness or strong partnerships within their community. Partnerships are a really big thing for sure. So it definitely strengthens any application if you're able to share other entities within your community that you're working with on the application. Developing a coordinated community response to address the spectrum of homelessness, such as a task force, is also important. Identifying opportunities for integration services and supports as well. There's quite a few more things on this page as well that you'll be able to see, like responding to emergency situations, providing basic needs, connecting clients to clinical and treatment services. The list goes on. Definitely, by all means, review this on your own time. If you have any questions, though, you are more than likely, or I'm sorry, more than willing to reach out to that RH applications email, and we are able to answer anything if you do have any questions in regards to what is eligible or ineligible. Capital projects are eligible. as mentioned and like said earlier, Sydney will be going through the capital sustainability plan later on today. All right, so some examples of some previous projects. So if you're not 100% sure on what you can apply for or what you would like to apply for, some previous examples of what we have funded are right here. So transition beds for people with addiction waiting to get into inpatient, funding for community navigators, housing support workers, outreach workers, all to assist folks who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness, accessing housing or support services. Shelter pods, so the development and retrofitting of trailers provide emergency shelter or something similar. Operational costs associated with temporary emergency MAP programs and shelters, site preparation for Indigenous-led transitional housing projects, and renovations of existing units and purchase of modular units for transitional supportive housing, land purchase for second new stage transitional shelter for women fleeing domestic violence, and finally data collection and community action plans. So it really does fund, or it really can fund an array of activities with Reaching Home. So if there are anything that you guys are thinking that's not listed on here, or you're just kind of wondering and you have an idea of how you think addressing homelessness in your own community could be done, we definitely recommend reaching out to us, and we're able to let you know if something that you're thinking about applying for would likely be eligible, or if unfortunately it would be deemed ineligible, just to save you any time on submitting an application. But yeah. So as it says here, this list is by no means exhaustive, so definitely reach out if you do have any questions on that front. For activities that aren't eligible, this is arguably, I guess, more important than what is eligible almost. But for here, we have providing landlords with incentives or bonuses to rent to people exiting homeless. So that is not something that is eligible. We aren't eligible to cover housing setup costs before other funding sources have been exhausted. So with Reaching Home, it's really supposed to be the final pillar that you guys are going to when all other options have been exhausted. So if there's other funding streams that are available to you, either through the government or any other programs, we want to make sure that you are using those first and that Reaching Home is the final bucket, basically, that we're tapping into. Really important too, not eligible to provide any funding for rent-to-own programs, also not eligible to fund any down payments or mortgage payments or anything like that. We also aren't eligible to provide any long-term rental assistance. So if you are doing any rental assistance, it should be on a short-term basis. Let's see, is there anything else in here? Also, as mentioned earlier, not eligible supports for low-income individuals or families who are not at imminent risk of homelessness. That's really, really, really big. Unfortunately, to use Reaching Home funding, we do need to make sure that we are specifically using it for those who are either homeless or at imminent risk of becoming homeless. With that said, a lot of that does fall on the service provider to be able to deem if somebody falls into that category. So we do fully trust our providers to know that when they are serving somebody, if they put them into this category of at imminent risk of homelessness. So we just wanted to flag that. Also, no construction or renovation of housing units not exclusively intended for people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. In addition to this, that would also include not funding any affordable housing. So transitional and things like that would be eligible. However, affordable is not something that falls under the Reaching Home parameters, which once again, Sydney will probably touch on a little bit later when she goes through capital projects. In addition to this, we also aren't eligible to apply funding for any sort of awareness campaigns or advocacy for homelessness, unfortunately. International travel costs, alcohol costs associated with parking tickets and fines, also not eligible. There's a lot more on that list, as I'm sure that you guys can see. So I definitely recommend taking the time and going through it just to see if there was anything that you were originally planning on applying for that do fall into that category. There is also, though, the Reaching Home directives, which is linked right in here, or you can also just Google it and they will come up. But yeah, the Reaching Home directives are a little bit long. However, they do have a lot of information in them. And if you are willing to, I definitely recommend reviewing them, as there is lots of good details regarding the program all shared in there. Yeah, once again, you can see we have the RH applications email linked in here again. So really driving that one home. If you guys have any questions for your applications, just reach out to that email and we'll be sure to answer them. Okay, now we're on to reporting. So with the reporting, this is kind of tying back into earlier when I had said that it is a reimbursement grant. So with their, or a reimbursement funding stream, sorry. But with this, there's a lot of reporting requirements that come with reaching home. So it's not something where unfortunately you're successful and you just get the funding put into your bank account and then you're expected to submit a report at the end of everything. There is quarterly or monthly, depending on how you decide to go about it, reporting requirements that need to be submitted to us at RDN, and then we're able to review them. So essentially how that works is you would complete either monthly or quarterly financial claims. This would mean that you are submitting receipts, any backup such as lease agreements or payroll to us, along with an expense breakdown that explains everything that you are putting the Reaching Home funding towards in either that month or that quarter. Our team would then review the backup and everything to make sure that everything that you guys are submitting for is eligible. Once we confirmed that the numbers matched, we would come back to you and let you know that you need to submit us an invoice, and then that invoice would be paid. So everything is paid retroactively. So you guys are the ones that typically would put forth the funding first, and then we reimburse you after the activities have occurred. With that said, if you are an organization that has any cash flow issues, or if you're potentially looking to submit for a capital project and you need a larger sum of money in order to be able to move forward with actually doing your project, we do offer advances. It's something that we just ask that you reach out to us for, to let us know if it's something that you do require. So for example, obviously, if we're doing a capital project and it's $100,000 and the money just needs to be paid to the developer, whoever it is, right away, we would just be needing to have quotes and a contract or whatever in place in order to know that it's like, okay, yes, this funding has been figured out where it's going to, and we have that backup for you. And then we would be able to send you the funding for that before, obviously, the actual expense takes place. If you were looking for something more where maybe you just have cash flow issues and you aren't able to pay out, for example, wages for a couple months at a time, that would be something that you can let us know at, and then we would potentially advance you a month or 2 or 3 or whatever it is that we deem appropriate for the wages in advance, and then you're able to pay your worker, and then you would submit obviously the backup following that. That is something though, like I said, you would just need to connect with our team about, and we would be able to work with you guys to make sure that we have that all up and in order. After the financial claims, though, there are also some data requirements. So there's both quarterly and annual data. The quarterly data is fairly straightforward. So there's not really too much to worry about there, but just kind of reminding that there needs to be capacity there in order to track just a few different statistics. With the annual data, it's a little bit more onerous, and it really depends on what types of activities your project is doing as to whether or not you will have any data that you need to report on and what exactly needs to be tracked. It's a bit of a confusing spreadsheet. However, we do always host trainings and everything like that for any projects who are successful in order to show everybody how to do the data collection, essentially. So I just wanted to flag that too, that there is the data that we need to worry about. Lastly, there are activity reports. So essentially the activity report is just letting us know how things have been going in that quarter and filling us in on all that information. So like I said, a little bit more reporting than what a typical grant has. So I just like to really make sure that before people apply, they just are aware of the additional legwork that is required with the program. With that said, though, Reaching Home is really great. We've been able to fund so many amazing projects, and our team is really good at working with projects and kind of meeting them where they're at when it comes to capacity, and doing our very best to build that capacity on your guys' teams. We obviously already went through how much funding communities can apply for, so I'm not going to talk to that anymore. And the communities where you can learn more. Obviously, we're all sitting in here today, and this is our final session, so we're privy to this. And then submitting the application, this is just another link here. If you're going through the application guide, that will take you directly to our application form on Google Form. Just one more time, I'm just going to say it even though I know I already did. December 8th at 1 p.m. is the deadline for submitting your applications. And then lastly, down here, we just have additional resources. So there's a link to the Indigenous Application Guide. If you are an Indigenous organization or community that's looking to apply for the funding, you can always link there and it'll take you directly to our guide. Capital application guidelines and sustainability checklists will take you over there. There's also a budget template that I'm going to go over in a second that we can link to, and then the budget example as well. And then when you get to the very end of the guide, you're going to get into Appendix A, which is the general and current application questions. I want to flag this right now really quick. I'm not going to go through all of the questions at this exact moment. I'm going to go through the Google form with everyone in just a minute, and I will do it there instead. But with the general and current application, basically, I just wanted to make sure that I flagged because we have the application going through Google Form and it is an online platform. We always like to recommend that projects take notes and copy the questions essentially from our appendix here where they're all listed, and then copy and paste those from a Word document or a Google Doc into the Google form. We find that by doing that, it just can prevent any potential technical errors. Google Form does save your information if you go through and come back, and it does work pretty well in that regard. But I just find that it's a little bit better if you do have your answers all saved on a separate Word document, just in case you run into any issues with Google Form or with word character limits. So with the Google form, we have noticed that there are some issues, and I just want to make sure that I address this. So Google form has a maximum character limit of 32,000 characters across the entire application. So when you guys submit your applications, you need to make sure that there's less than 32,000 characters between all of the questions that you answer. And just so everyone's clear, a character is a letter, it's a space, it's a comma. Those all count as being a character. It's not a word, it's like physically a singular character. So I just like to flag that too. And that's the nice thing. If you put it in Word, it's able to track how many characters you've used to help keep you underneath that 32,000 character threshold. The other and final reason that I want to say to make sure that you're tracking your information in a Word document is if you come into an issue with Google Form, if it's really not accepting it or whatever technical issue you have, you always at least have that information then in a Word document, and you can always send us an email so you're able to attach it and we have that information then there for you as well. So yeah, I just really like to stress the importance of using a Word or something similar when it comes to tracking that information. But yeah, all of the questions though for both current and general applications are listed in the appendix down here. So you're able to just copy and paste those and complete them on your Word if that's how you would like to go. But yeah, that's basically everything for the application guide. I know it's a lot of information, and I hope I didn't go too quickly. But if you guys have any questions, I am more than happy to answer them. If not, though, I think I'm just going to hop into the budget really quickly and show you guys how the budget works first, and then we can talk about capital projects and go through the Google form. So if you are a current or if you're a current project or you've applied for Reaching Home funding in the past, you might be familiar with our budget template. However, unfortunately, if you are familiar, it doesn't help you this year because we are switching things up. With that said, we're hoping that it makes things actually a little bit easier, but we know that change is always difficult. They're just different, right? So I want to just make sure that we go through everything today just so everyone is aware of the slight changes that are happening with the budget template. I do think that it actually makes it easier. It's like a single page now, and you're able to see everything on it. I think the way that we've done it does actually improve things a lot. But because it's different, I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So this is the budget example, and it is linked also on the website as well. So you're able to reference this on your own when you're completing the budget later on. Essentially for this though, we'll just kind of go through and I'll show you how it works, and then I will show you the actual Excel template as well right after. So obviously, first off, you're going to want to input your name of organization. In the example that we have here, it's the municipality of ABC. It's a little bit different than previous budget forms that we've used in the way that it's broken down. So you're going to notice there's a few different categories. The first category is going to be staff wages. The second category is project costs. And then we have administration costs. And then capital costs. And very finally, at the end, we have just other funding sources that we're able to complete down here. for the sake of this meeting right now, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to explain how the example is set up on here, just so hopefully everyone's on the same page. So we have two different options for how you could fill in the staff wages, just depending on what works best for you. Either one is totally fine. The first example is a housing coordinator at part-time at time and a half would be in the position name. And then obviously under the description, this is what we would essentially like or something similar when you're completing the description. So in this example, it's the housing coordinator will be responsible for the overall project delivery, project scope, and ensuring deadlines are met. The year one salary is $26,000 plus mercs and benefits of $5,000 to make a total of $31,000. In year two, we are determining a 2% increase for $26,780 total plus mercs and benefits of $5,000 again for a total of $31,780 and over the 2 years, $62,780. So obviously when you're filling it in, then we're putting $31,000 in the first year category. And then with the slight budget increase in the year two category, we're putting $31,780. I like to flag this right here because it is something that sometimes projects forget. It might be an organizational decision that you guys are always getting a 2 or 3% wage increase every year. And if that is something that your organization typically does, it's nice to just build it right into your budget so you don't end up with a shortfall or anything in future years with the program. So super simple there, but yeah, it's really just breaking down essentially where this $31,000 number comes from. So we're aware. So yeah, the other option for this would be the housing case manager or navigator. So in this description, we have just the housing case manager for year one. When you at part-time is $31 an hour at 18 hours a week for 52 weeks a year, which brings us to a total of $29,016. In year two, they're going to get a 3% increase to bring them up to $31.93 an hour. And they're actually going to be working 20 hours that week instead of just the 18 hours. So you see the slight difference in that to bring them to a total of $33,207.20 in the second year. So once again, it just kind of explains to us then why year two is a little bit more than year one and just where that year one total comes from and how much work we can kind of expect to be coming from this. So that's really the biggest thing there. It's just kind of explaining where the numbers come from, I guess, in the description. So yeah, I hope that that makes sense. Definitely, by all means, you can basically copy and paste this formula and use it on your own and just make the slight changes when it comes to filling it in. So I hope that that makes it really easy for you. If you guys want to fill it in a little bit differently, but still have similar information, that's all that matters. I can see, sorry, in the chat right now, asking about a maximum. So the only maximum that we have is just at the end of the budget, we need to make sure that in year one, you aren't spending more than $100,000. And in year two, you aren't spending more than $100,000 either for a total of $200,000 over the project, specifically for wages or anything. If you want to request $100,000 in wages, that's perfectly fine. You just wouldn't be able to request any funding in any other categories then based off of the $100,000 a year maximum. I hope that helps to answer that. I'm also sorry if I'm missing any other questions in the chat. Once I'm done going through this, I will come back to them too. Okay, so the next category here is project costs. So this is where a lot of the detail is going to come through. Obviously, we have quite a few examples here. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of them, but you're more than welcome to review them. They all kind of follow a very similar format. But for the sake of the example today, let's just do damage deposits. So obviously in the expense type or item, we're putting damage deposits. And then in the description, we're going to say to support people experiencing homelessness with moving into safe and secure housing, 6 individuals or families at $1,000 each, which brings us to a total of $6,000 in year one and $6,000 in year two. So what this is just really important because it's showing us when you're requesting for the $6,000 that you're intending on helping about 6 individuals. Obviously, when the rubber hits the road and you guys are submitting your expenses later on, it's not to say that you're only able with your funding to help 6 people and they have to be $1,000. And if somebody needs $1,100 and someone needs $900, like it all works out. It's just kind of giving us a gauge on where you're expecting things to fall. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. With that said, too, yeah, like some places want to have maximums. So some organizations, they just set parameters when they're doing things like damage deposits or rental arrears where They will only help up to $1,000 or $1,500 or whatever it is. And obviously, that would be a good metric to use in here. But if you aren't an organization that's planning on implementing anything, I would say just go with whatever you think the average would be in your community and what you are expecting the need to be essentially. But yeah, so just kind of like that. Like I said, the biggest thing is really just breaking out in the description where your dollar amount is coming from, just so we kind of have a gauge for how much or what exactly that number is going to be divided out and amongst. But if you have any questions when it comes to the budget, definitely feel free to also just reach out to the RH applications email, or you can ask us later during this session too, and we'll do our best to answer any questions regarding the budgets. Next up, we have administration costs. So not a requirement, but if you are submitting for administration costs, you're only eligible to submit up to 15% of your budget. This would be inclusive in the $100,000. So if you were submitting for 15%, the maximum would be $15,000 of your $100,000 budget. So $85,000 in project or staff wages or whatever it is, plus the 15,000 in admin for a total of $100,000. I hope that makes sense, but let me know if anyone's unclear on that. The example in here would be office rent at 25%. So the rent for the Reaching Home office space was $200 a month with in-kind contributions of $800 a month. So the actual office space was $1,000 a month essentially, but it's saying for the sake of Reaching Home funding, they're going to be using $2,400 a year in year one and year two to go towards that office rent space. And then if we come down to capital expenses, so capital expense, just so everybody is aware, is going to be anything that is $1,000 or more. So if there is any items that you guys are looking to apply for that are going to cost $1,000 individually or more, they need to be put into this category. In the example here, it's a laptop. So the description is showing that there were two computers purchased for clients to use to apply for income assistance, jobs, etc. Obviously, that makes them at $1,500 each for a total of $3,000 for the two computers, and the expense is likely to take place in year one. So that's where that kind of comes from. With that said, if you are applying for anything that is a capital asset, which is in that $1,000 or more category, you will have to complete a capital requisition form, just basically stating that if by the end of the project, the item is no longer being used by the Reaching Home program or for its intended purpose, you could have repayment clauses with that. With that said, we've never really had an issue with it, so it's not something to be overly stressed about, but there is just that additional paperwork and stuff that you guys would have to complete if you are planning on purchasing anything that is $1,000 or more. With that said, too, if you were wanting to buy a laptop and you could find one on sale for $999, then guess what? You don't need to put it into the capital asset folder, because then it would just be a regular project cost essentially. So just wanted to flag that there. I hope it makes sense, but if not, definitely feel free to ask any questions there as well. The very final part of the new budget template is just going to be the other funding sources. So as you can see here, this is just where you're putting in any other funding that you guys might be receiving, whether it be different grants or from other community organizations, or maybe just your own organization in general. So in this example, we have FCSS is giving $19,200 towards the other $800 a month of the Reaching Home office expenses that were discussed up here in the admin category, for a total of $19,200 over the 24-month period. Another option shows FCSS giving $40,000 in funding for the remainder of the housing coordinator wages, which was managed up here, obviously. So yeah, that's how the new budget looks. So it is all one page. It's pretty hopefully clear for everybody. If people do have questions, definitely by all means ask away. I want to pull up really quickly just the actual Excel file. So just one second while I reshare my screen, sorry. There we go. Okay. So this is what, when you go on our website and you download the template, you're going to get. So obviously just a blank version of the example that we went through. The important thing that I want to flag though right now and why I want to go through it is just clicking the second tab right here that says examples of eligible activities. So this is a new little function that hopefully helps you as you're completing the budget. We have it broken down into the exact same categories that the budget itself is broken down into. So it kind of shows you what items might fall into which category to hopefully make this as easy as possible for projects to complete. Obviously, if you have questions and you're not sure of where something falls in the budget line items, definitely reach out to us and we're more than happy to try to assist. But yeah, it just gives different options and items that might fall into staff wages, project costs, capital costs, and then admin costs. So definitely a really good just little helpful tool that's on the sheet, and I would recommend reviewing when you guys are submitting. But yeah, that is everything for the budget. Sydney, did you want to go through the capital expense claim, or sorry, the capital
Project.
sustainability plan right now, or do you want me to go through the questions?
Yeah, I think that you know what, let's do it. And I'm starting to see even just one question I was just about to answer in a chat in the chat here. I'm just going to press send, but I'll speak to it as well. So in terms of for like consultant professional fees that are listed under capital expenses, so this would be specifically for like capital projects. And there is no, I'm assuming you're referring to like the capital disposition form. There's no requirement for that form to be completed for these type of expenses. The capital disposition form is specifically for capital assets. So like let's say if there was like a vehicle or a refrigerator or a laundry machine, those types of purchases, as well as a laptop, which Bryn had in her example. But when it comes to any kind of um, goods and services being purchased, if it's greater than $25,000 for a particular goods or service, then we do require, and this is just federal government requirements, we do require at least three quotes and just a rationale as to why from the project specifically why they decided to go with one particular quote over another. So that's just it's pretty standard, I think, when it comes to federal funding. But yeah, I'll press send. Sorry, I said I'd press send, so you can see the answer as well. But just wanted to speak to that. In terms of the capital projects sustainability plan, so Brittany, yeah, if you don't mind sharing the capital project guidelines document, awesome. So just really quickly, and Bryn spoke to this already, giving some examples of the types of projects we're able to fund through Reaching Home. But when it comes to capital specifically, Reaching Home, we can fund capital costs associated with the development or renovations to emergency shelters to transitional or permanent supportive housing. So this is specifically housing that provides those wraparound supports to folks and the residents who are living in that housing. And so one example right now, for example, we're funding Soaring Eagle Support Society in Whitecourt. They're using an old motel that they've basically converted into 31 rooms to provide supportive housing to folks staying there. So that's the type of supportive housing that we're able to fund through Reaching Home. Unfortunately, as Bryn already said, we are not able to fund affordable or any kind of social housing. We get these questions a lot and definitely understand the confusion around language and everyone has a bit of a different interpretation or definition. But just wanted to be transparent about that. And that's because CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, they oversee the affordable housing portfolio. Obviously, too, with Build Canada Homes in their announcements, as of late, they're going to be focusing as well on investing into capital projects, including affordable housing and supportive housing. So Reaching Home at the end of the day, to be totally honest, we get mostly operational funding requests. Capital requests are certainly eligible, and we do fund them a handful, I would say, each year. But largely due to some of the sustainability plan requirements, they can pose barriers for folks in being able to move forward with their projects. And so I'll speak to some of that. But just wanted to, yeah, acknowledge that due to the limited funding that we have for rural, remote Indigenous communities here in Alberta, um, oftentimes we're not able to fully fund a capital project. So what happens is communities will leverage Reaching Home funding with other sources of funding that they have to do a project. Now, the only other types of expenses that I haven't talked about that are eligible for capital vehicles, purchase of vehicles to use for outreach in the delivery of services, certainly eligible, and non-residential facilities are eligible as well. So this would be, for example, we're partially funded, I should say, the development of a supportive, like kind of housing community hub, that broader the broader community can access in addition to the folks staying in the supportive housing. Specifically, this was in a First Nation community. So yeah, we have been able to fund quite a diverse range of activities. But when it comes to capital projects, so I had already spoken about the if obviously if you're working with a certain subcontracting out some of the work and you're working with somebody and it's going to cost greater than $25,000, I mentioned there is that requirement to provide three quotes. We don't need those quotes at the time that the application is submitted, but we will need those at a later date if the project were to move forward. What we do need, however, at the time of the application and there are specific questions in the application that speak to these exact, essentially four pillars of the sustainability plan. The first is funding sources. And so we do need to have an understanding of what are the funding sources for your capital project beyond just reaching home. So we ask folks to provide that information. If you have letters of support and confirmation confirming the funding at the time that you're submitting your application, please feel free to include those. But the letters of support in this particular um, section are optional because we understand that it takes time to get, letters from funders confirming sources. It takes time to get letters of support within the community. The application period was only open for 5 weeks, so we understand that can be a barrier. So please know, we ask for you to share as much information as possible um, within the application around capital sustainability plan requirements, but there is some follow-up that will be done after the fact if the board does select your project in moving forward for funding. So that's number one, funding sources. And then number two, and this time I will go in order, project impacts. So this would be, for example, if you were to purchase a vehicle, would you need to hire staff in order to drive that vehicle? If you were to develop or renovate or retrofit, a building for emergency shelter, supportive housing, would there need to be additional staff hired in order to operate those units? Or maybe you already have the staff because you're just renovating an existing facility. So these are the types of questions. And again, where is that funding coming from to support those impacts that the project will ultimately have as a result of creating additional spaces and beds and units? Number three is partnerships. I think this is one we see time and time again. Communities have no trouble meeting, especially the smaller communities. You guys have fantastic partnerships and really close connections with a lot of service providers. And so this is where, again, at the time of the application is due, you may not have the letters of support ready to go or handy. That will come at a later date, but this is where you put information about the folks that are, very much in support and whether they're providing not just financial support, but in-kind support to support the project. And then lastly, and this is by far the most challenging requirement for communities to meet, at least in our experience, and that's because we know, I mean, there really is not much operational funding out there for folks to support community members who are experiencing housing insecurity or who are at risk. And so um, unfortunately, again, these are federal government requirements, these sustainability plan requirements. If your project, if you are putting in a capital project application, the expectation from the federal government is that um, once your agreement ends with us, your reaching home agreement ends with us, for the 5 years following that period, the feds want to see that operational sustainability. So, for example, again, if you're renovating or developing, actually, let's just use, I'm trying to think of like an example. Let's say, okay, we've had folks purchase or use reaching home funding to purchase a home to provide supportive housing. So they've used the funding to support with the down payment. Okay, who is going to be providing those supports? Who's going to be providing the rent, utilities? Is that going to be the responsibility of the tenants residing there? Assuming, of course, you're assisting them with accessing income supports or AISH, or is that going to be the responsibility of your organization to provide those operational and maintenance costs? So these are all we've seen different kinds of, I guess, models play out in communities. We've seen in some municipalities actually commit to providing these operational maintenance costs for projects, which has been really amazing to see, with, of course, the expectation that administration or FCSS, they're going to go out and look for additional dollars that might be able to support those expenses as well. So just wanted to provide like a municipal example because we often hear, the we often hear from folks, of course, and we understand municipal dollars are stretched really thin. It can be really hard to find the dollars to commit to this type of project. But if you're looking and trying to get your municipality on board, this is one way around it that we've heard from communities is, the municipality will commit, but with the understanding that other grant funding and dollars can be accessed at later dates. So it's and again, recognizing this is a big it's a difficult one for a lot of the smaller communities to meet, but that doesn't mean it hasn't been done. And happy to chat about ideas and kind of creative ways to be able to meet this requirement if folks have any ideas. But that's like a very quick overview of the sustainability plan requirements. I'm trying to think, Bryn, do you know, did I miss anything at all? I think we talked about.
I think you nailed it.
Okay. Well, if there is any questions, and I saw, okay, no other questions have come in so far. Cool. Okay. Well, with that being said, I knew there's always one more thing. Um, so unfortunately, the federal government doesn't rep or recognize fundraising as a sustainable source of funding for operational sustainability. So that's just something to keep in mind. They really want to see whether it's a commitment from other funders, from nations, municipalities, from your organization, or other organizations in the community. They really want to see those really hard financial commitments, unfortunately. So, yeah, like I said, though, we typically get more operational requests than capital, I would say, because of these really strict requirements. So really the government's looking for these shovel-ready projects that already have other partners at the table. Again, just due to the minimal funding we have. That's just kind of the reality of yeah, and the nature of this funding. So thanks, Bryn.
Thank you, Sydney. Does anyone have any questions specifically regarding the capital that they wanted to discuss right now? If not, I can bring you all over to the actual application and we can go through this. And if people have questions also at the end, we can go through any questions afterwards as well. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Is that okay for people to read? Is that big enough?
Maybe just a little bigger, Bryn.
Better?
That looks good. Sweet.
All right. So yeah, so when you get to our Google form for the Reaching Home Call for Proposals 2026 to 2028, this is what it should look like. As mentioned, you can obviously get there from our website or through a number of our application guides and forms and stuff like that with the link. This is where it will redirect you to them. So this is where you're going to have to complete the application. The very first step, which isn't shown here because I'm logged into my actual Google Drive, it will ask you to sign in to a Google account if you aren't already. So like I said, you can use a personal one if your current work does not isn't a Gmail account essentially. You can always use a private one and then you can submit your actual work information later on, and that's the one that we can contact you through. If you do have any issues with using a Google email in order to access this form, please let us know and we can always discuss that and try to find a better solution as well, if that is something that you're worried about. But yeah, so this is what the form looks like when you get in. It'll ask you if you want to include your email, so you can just check that off. And then you're going to notice this forward right here. The very first thing that comes up is that character count. And I know I've already touched on this once, but I just really want to make sure that I stress it. Google Forms, so this isn't something that's put forward by us or anything else. This is just like a hard, fast thing with Google Form. Any response needs to be under 32,000 characters. So that's across all of your different answers combined. So everything from answering what your name is at the very beginning to signing off on your name at the very last question. We want to make sure that we're counting all of that towards the character count. There isn't any specific character count limit that's imposed in any specific questions. We do have word maximums that we request that you stay within, just in order to make it simpler when it comes to reviewing and just making sure that you're giving the amount of information that we need and we don't have super lengthy reports essentially that we need to read, but also in hopes that it will keep it underneath this 32,000 character limit. There isn't anything in the form that's going to stop you though from writing more. So the reason that I say this and I talk about using the word format or whatever it is first in order to track how many characters you have, with Google Form, it doesn't tell you that you've reached this 32,000 character limit until you try to submit. So unfortunately, you might hit this character limit at the very end. You might hit it earlier on, and it's not going to tell you until you try to hit the submit button at the very end. So I just like to flag this because I want to make sure that people aren't getting this notification essentially and that they're saving as much time as they can, because when it comes to the end and it just tells you you're over it, it doesn't tell you by how much you're over it. It doesn't tell you what question to trim or anything like that. It just tells you that unfortunately your response is too big and you can't submit it. So I really like to just stress this and suggest using a character counter online or using just Word to count your characters and everything to make sure that you are able to stay at 32,000 limit. So yeah, just really want to stress that. But the next thing on here you're going to see is obviously the due date, December 8th at 1 p.m., which we've already gone through. Uh, there's also a reminder on here again, as mentioned, obviously, to keep your answers just in a Word document in case there are any issues with the character count or anything else when it comes to submitting. So you have all of your answers saved. But yeah. Now we can get into the actual form. The very first thing that you're going to see in here is going to be the contact information, and we just give a brief description at the very top with the signing authority, the primary contact, and the secondary contact. So when you log in, regardless of the type of application that you are applying for, whether it be Indigenous, general, or current projects, everybody fills this very first page in. So it's the exact same for everybody. You're going to go through, you're going to submit your signing authority, you're going to submit your primary contact, and you're going to submit your secondary contact. For the signing authority, that should be whoever is in charge at your organization of signing off on contracts. So whoever is legally allowable, essentially, to sign off on a contract and make it legally binding, that's who we want to have here. So whether it's your CEO, it's your executive director, whoever that may be in your organization that is approved to have that authority, that's who we want to have in the signing authority category. With that said, the signing authority is not the person that we're going to be contacting if we have any questions or issues or anything with your application. That's going to be the primary and secondary contact. So if the signing authority is you and you're the one creating the application and you are the one who wants to be contacted if there's an issue with it, then we would want you to put your information in both the signing authority category and the primary contact category. But if not, then yeah. Like I said, the signing authority is mostly just there so we know if you are successful, who we need to address the contracts to when it comes time to doing the contracts. As mentioned, we'll be notifying projects in February 2026 if they're selected or not for the 2026 to 2028 funding. And by having this piece here all complete, it just makes the process a lot quicker when it comes to submitting contracts and making sure that everything can start on time for the projects who are wanting to start on April 1st, 2026. So that's the reason for that there. So just make sure that you are using the appropriate information when it comes to filling out your signing authority. Primary contact, whoever you are putting in here, should be the person who is largely in charge of creating the application, who will be able to answer any questions regarding the application if we have any. Secondary contact should also be quite familiar with the application. So if there's somebody else that's completing it with you and is able to be used as this contact, then that's great. It might also be somebody who is going to help with actually doing the project if the project is successful. So yeah, that who's goes in there. And then we get down to the organization information. So super generic. You're just going to fill in your organization information, your name. You're going to fill in the organization's address, and then you will complete whatever type of organization it is that you fall into. So for example, not-for-profit. If you are a for-profit organization that is planning to apply, we do recommend reaching out just to make sure that everything is eligible with the funding. But anyone else other than that, just select and there shouldn't be any issue in there. Fill out your organization year of incorporation, super straightforward. Same with your mission or vision statement. And then the very last thing, and this is the most important thing on the very first page that you're going to want to select, is whether or not you are applying for a general application, a current application, or an Indigenous application. It's really important that you fill this out accurately because depending on which one of these you select, it's going to take you to different pieces of the form. So from here, basically, it pies off into different applications. So we want to make sure that you're doing the appropriate thing. If you're applying for capital funding, regardless of if you are a current project now or not, you do need to apply through the general application form because there's sustainability plan requirements and everything that Sydney had talked about that need to be completed. So that is deemed to be a general application. Current projects, that's going to be anyone who is currently receiving funding from 2024 to 2026 right now. So currently a project with Reaching Home. And if they're continuing on with operations essentially as if there's like small little things that you're wanting to add in and it's not really changing the scope of your project, it's fine to continue applying as a current project. But if you are looking to largely change the scope of your project, then you would also need to apply under a general application. So I hope that makes sense. If you have questions, definitely let us know now or email us at the RH applications email, and we can always chat and make sure that you are using the appropriate one. But yeah, just want to stress that you click the right one. For the sake of this right now, we're going to do a general application to get started. So we'll select that, and then I'm just going to hit next. And you guys will be able to see all of the questions. And for whatever reason, it always likes to take me back to the top here. So how I talked about not being that technically savvy, I guess. Here we go. Good. Okay. Now this takes us to the general application. So if you are applying for a general application, this is the form that it's going to take you to. So essentially, first, you're going to want to fill in your organizational experience. As you can see, it says max 300 words. So please try to keep it within that 300 word maximum. Also, I feel like that's just a good idea essentially for how much content we're looking in these questions. That was the other reason that we like to add in these maximums here. But yeah, so essentially you're just wanting to provide clear details on your organization's history, any experience you have in leading similar projects, and then if you have received any similar funding to Reaching Home, whether it be other government funding or actually maybe you previously in 2022 or something received Reaching Home funding, this would be a good place to also mention it as well. It kind of just shows how I was talking earlier about the stiff reporting requirements and everything that comes with Reaching Home. Good to tie that into here. But yeah, so that's just kind of completing the organizational experience. Obviously, we're going to need a project name, so just anything that you guys are planning on calling it. If it's already an existing program and you're wanting to continue on with that, you can always just put what the current program is you're looking for funding for. Then we get into the project description and community need. So this is a maximum of 500 words. So this is just going to be where you're giving us really information on what exactly it is that your project is wanting to do. This is largely the meat of the application. Tell us what you're planning on using the funding for. Show us what homelessness looks like in your community. Explain the need. If you have any data or statistics that you're able to share, we really do appreciate receiving that kind of information. So if you've done an estimation or point in time count, anything similar, definitely make sure that you can include any data that you guys might have in this section here. The next step is the project details. So how will the requested funds be used to support and provide services to people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness? So just kind of explaining where exactly the funding is going to go and what the project is going to look like, a bit more information in there, kind of building on that previous question. And then where will the project activities take place? So just state whatever it is or wherever it is that you guys are planning on serving. Some places you're only planning on dealing with your own community or your own municipality. If you're planning on dealing with largely central Alberta or whatever it is, if there's a few communities around you that you're looking to, maybe you're located in one area of Alberta, but you're actually planning on serving a different area. Just make sure that any information in there is included in this section. For who will your community organization partner or engage with throughout the project? Basically, just mention any partnerships that you guys have, whether they're already existing or they're partnerships that you're planning on developing and building. Potentially, there's other people in the community that you guys are looking to do a joint application with for this project. You could mention them in here as well. Partnership is really big. We want to know that you guys are working with other people within your community for a holistic approach. So definitely just whatever that might look like, you can include in here with the partnerships. What are the expected outcomes of the project? So what do you hope is going to come forward with the Reaching Home funding if you guys are eligible and receiving it? What is the goal? What should things look like in 2028? Are you planning on housing 15 people by the end of it? What is your current goal, basically? So that's what we're going to want in the outcomes section here. And then we get into the project timeline. So that's just kind of giving us a description of when your project is going to start, when it's going to end, what are key dates in there that you guys are looking to do things. So maybe if you are looking to hire somebody, what date do you expect to have these people hired by and starting if you're looking to do that, or any other just key information essentially. So just point form is totally fine in here, but it's just going through and giving us a brief outline of what the project timeline will look like. For reference, about 300 words would be the maximum on this. Then we go down into the anticipated start date. So we want to know what date you're planning on starting. If it's April 1st, 2026, and then ending March 31st, 2028, if you're planning on doing the whole thing. Maybe you have a capital project and it's not going to be ready to go and you're expecting it to start, in, I don't know, January 1st, 2027, and that's when you think it's going to be good, then you can put that in there or whatever. The answer to that maybe if you're also only applying for a single year, it might just be April 1st, 2026 until March 31st, 2027. So just some different options in there, just so everybody is aware too with our fiscal years. So they go April 1st until March 31st when we talk about years, just so we're clear. I know most people are probably used to that with government funding and grants, but I just like to preface that because I know that there sometimes is confusion between obviously the calendar year and the fiscal year. So yeah. For service populations and demographics, you can just select any of the people that are listed in here that you guys are intending on serving. And yeah, there's also another category. If there is anything that we didn't mention up above that you would like to add in, by all means, definitely select other and you are more than welcome to complete that as well. You can expand a bit on the demographics that you guys had selected in the previous question as well down here, maximum 150 words. So not a ton of content, but just to give a bit more perspective if you would like to. When we were talking about the Regional Advisory Board's commitment to funding Indigenous serving and Indigenous-led projects, this is where the commitment to reconciliation really comes in. So we just want to hear a little bit more about how your organizations embeds reconciliation into your programs and services. Any steps that you're taking to support Indigenous people who are experiencing houselessness and building relationships with communities and nations could also be mentioned in here. So that's a maximum of 500 words. Anything that you feel fits into that category, essentially. Yeah. And then we have an evaluation strategy. So just describing how your organization will report on project outcomes, successes, challenges, lesson learns. You can describe how you plan to track the results of your project. Yeah, anything like that can go into here as well. And then the funding requests. So however much funding you are requesting for April 1st, 2026 to March 31st, 2027 will go in here. So in the example, we have $75,000, obviously less than $100,000, so that's great. And then in year 2 for 27 to 28, we have another $75,000, once again under that $100,000 threshold. This question right after, it's supposed to be the sum of the 2 previous questions. So it's April 1st, 2026 to March 31st, 2028. So obviously we were requesting $75,000 each year for a total of $150,000, which is in this section right here, just so everyone is clear on that. And then what activities are you requesting funding for? So when we went through that budget template and the different categories, obviously there were the staff wages, the project costs, the admin, and the capital. You would go through and you would select whichever ones of these you essentially applied for funding within and whichever categories you filled out. So it might be all of them, it might be one of them, whatever that looks like on yours. And then you're going to complete the budget template and you're going to upload it here. It's just a budget upload. So after you've completed the Excel file, make sure you put it in there. We do ask that you submit it in an Excel file, not a PDF. The Excel is important just because it lets us see any calculations. If there ends up being any small errors or anything, we just really do want it in an Excel format. So please do make sure that it is submitted that way. And then there's also an option if you want to list any letters of support. We only allow for one form to be uploaded here. So if you have multiple letters of support from multiple community members or partners, just make sure that you put them all into one singular PDF, and you can have multiple letters on top of each other, but we just want them all zipped together in a single PDF. I hope that makes sense. And then we've got funding advocacy. So as mentioned with the $100,000 a year maximum funding, the funding advocacy comes in here where basically we know you're only eligible to ask for up to $200,000 over the 2-year time. But this is where we just want to know if there wasn't a maximum, how much funding essentially would you actually be requesting? Would you be requesting, to have 3 staff members do the job, but unfortunately, because of the maximum, you're only requesting 1 right now? Would you be actually requesting to build a shelter in your community? What is it, and what would the dollar value attached to it be? So it's a 150-word maximum, so we're not looking for a crazy ton of detail, but if there is additional funding that you would have been requesting, we would love to hear about it. We have this in here also just because we use a lot of the time. So Sydney, I believe, had mentioned earlier that in our previous call we had received, I believe it was 18 or $22 million in funding requests during the last cycle, which was a lot more obviously than the $4 million that we had to divvy out. We used that though as a way to advocate for additional funding for Reaching Home. So we just like to ask for this information because it gives us a snapshot that we're able to share with other government organizations and just to do advocacy essentially to request any additional funding or just let people know essentially what the issues are in communities and what the need really is. Because obviously, when we have a maximum, we're not going to be able to figure that out. It's not a required question, so you don't have to fill it up, but we do really appreciate you doing it. And like I said, in the past, it has been something that we've been able to get more funding for great communities for. So definitely recommend completing it. And then we also have just a section with any other information that you would like to let us know. So if there's anything else you want to add in for your application that wasn't mentioned somewhere else, feel free to stick that in there. And then next for the general, the very last question is going to be, are you requesting funds for capital expenditures? I'm just going to select yes so we can see what the sustainability plan section looks like. And I'll try to go through that relatively quickly because I realize that we are running out of time. So I'm very sorry. So if you are selecting the capital project, this is where
I
it's going to take
think
you.
I
Oh,
think then we can skip through the capital project just because we went through it just for time. Because I know we want to get to the current projects and then leave some time for questions. So I think
yeah,
we can skip through that piece.
sounds good. We will just hit back then there.
Awesome. Yeah, hopefully. And then if folks do have questions specifically about the capital project requirements, yeah, we'll have some time today and even afterwards, you can certainly follow up with our team.
Perfect. Thank you, Sydney.
Of course.
Okay. All right. So then we're going to move over to the current project application. So this should take us there right now. Sorry for my scrolling there. I hope nobody is sick after watching that. Okay, so the current project application form. So this one looks a little bit different than what the general application form is, because obviously it's referencing the fact that your project already took place last year. So we're kind of just looking to hear a bit more on how that went. With that said, the very first question is looking for providing any updates on urgent needs or challenges your organization or community is currently facing, with providing support to people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness. So we just want to hear a little bit more about the need here. Similar question to what is asked in the general application form, but yeah, just any needs or challenges that your organization has in regards to houselessness in the community. And then this gets more into the fact that you were a previously funded project. So what outcomes did your project achieve during the previous funding cycle of 2024 to 2026? And then share any data and success stories. So any information you have here that you would like to share for what went well or what didn't go well in your last project with us, definitely included here. Maximum 500 words. But yeah. And then what challenges did you face with your Reaching Home project, if any, during the previous 2024 to 2026 cycle? How do you intend to address these challenges in 26 to 28? And please share your learnings with us. So this could be anything from it was hard to get funding out the door originally. Maybe it was reporting requirements. Maybe it's just the lack of housing in your community and you guys were hoping to be able to get more uh, sorry, and you were hoping to be able to get more people housed. However, unfortunately, the housing supply wasn't something that was in your community. Whatever that may look like, just any challenges that you faced, you can put it in here. Once again, maximum 500 words if you'd like to share them there. And then what went well for your project in 24 to 26, and how do you intend to build on those successes in your upcoming project? So pretty self-explanatory, talking about your wins and everything there and how you're going to build on them. How will the requested funds continue to be used to support and provide services to people experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness? And then what are the expected outcomes for 2026 to 2028? So yeah, just how are we looking at using the dollars and what do we think are going to be the outcomes from using the dollars in your community? Who will your organization partner with and or engage with throughout this project? Please explain how your community partners work well together. Similar question to the general application, just any partnerships that you guys have within your communities, existing ones, any ones that you guys are currently working on developing and building. And then please confirm where the project activities will take place. So just letting us know if they're only happening specifically in your community, if you're planning on serving northeastern Alberta, whatever that may be. Just complete that in there. Same question also from the general application. So commitment to reconciliation and just describing how your organization embeds reconciliation into your programs and services and how you guys serve Indigenous and First Nations communities and Métis communities and organizations essentially with your organization and building relationships with them. So anything that you're able to complete in there as well. Same thing with the funding request here. So in this example, we have $90,000 in year one and then $100,000 in year two for a total of $190,000 here. So just making sure that those sums add up to here. I know that it's three very similar questions altogether, but yeah, just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that. Same thing with the budget, obviously. So just selecting whichever categories your project is planning on operating within based off of that budget example that we went through. Upload your file for the Excel for the budget. Makes sense. And then if you want to submit any letters of support here, same thing. Just please make sure you're only keeping one PDF. And if it has multiple letters in it, that's all good. But we're only able to submit one file physically right here. Same thing with the funding advocacy. Just anything that you guys are looking for in the community that maybe you weren't able to apply for because of that $100,000 maximum. Put it in this section here. And then we get to the submission agreement. So this is exactly what it would look like too for the general application. If we would have hit next instead of going back to the current project, everybody gets taken to this page. It's the very final thing. So essentially you just want to confirm that the signing authority does approve of this submission. We want to make sure that you confirm that you know that not all projects are going to necessarily receive funding. And then you'll type your name here as an electronic signature. And then if you want to, you can toggle it on to send a copy of your response to yourself, or you can toggle it off if you don't wish to. And then you just hit submit. Pretty self-explanatory. If you do have any questions regarding the Google form, you can also actually go to our website, and there is under the additional resources this how to use a Google form template that you can review if you guys have any questions. I hope that makes sense though, and I know that we are running out of time, so I think we're good to parlay into questions unless Sydney wanted to add anything before we wrap up.
The only thing, yeah, I'll just mention is we have had a couple issues with folks trying to submit through the Google form as of late. We've actually even contacted some IT support and they haven't even been able to really figure it out. The good news is we have had lots of applications submitted already through the Google form, so we know it's working, but in the odd case that for some reason there's some glitch on your end, yeah, please just know we don't want this to be a barrier for you submitting an application. And that's why Britton said earlier, like definitely save your work in another file, work out of that file, and then just copy and paste it over. Because then worst case, you just fire us off that document that you've created along with your budget to the email, and we'll make sure your application gets received. So yeah, in the future we will be looking at alternative platforms because this is not our fan. Or yeah, Google Form is not a fan of us. We are not a fan of it. But yeah, we just appreciate everyone at least trying to use this form. It just really helps streamline things for our team. We get close to 80 applications, and as you can imagine, 80 emails and having to file everything away, it's time consuming. So that's why we try and use this platform. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. And we can definitely stay on, Bryn and I, for another 5-10 minutes for questions because I know, yeah, we only have about 5 minutes now. So don't want to, yeah, don't want folks to think that there's not enough time to ask their questions. Happy to stay on. And yeah, so we'll throw it out there. And I know if you've seen me being very distracted, by the way, there's been some folks that were having trouble getting into the link earlier. So I was helping with them. And then there's been some just private questions that folks have been messaging through the chat. So please know I am here and present. And yeah, was just dealing with some tech stuff. So yeah, Jess, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for putting on this session. And apologies, I had to join late. I had some conflicts and so joined a little bit late. So this may have already been addressed, but I just wanted to clarify with the budget document, specifically for, I'm not sure if it looks different for general applications versus returning, but I'm just curious, under the other funding source section, are you, is RDN looking for kind of all funding sources that covers sort of the full organization budget, or just funding or in-kind contributions related to the actual project?
Yeah, so we would just be looking for any funding that would be in relation to the project. We don't need to know all of the funding within your whole organization. If you want to touch a little bit on other funding sources for the whole organization, if you think it helps your application when you're submitting the actual application questions, just like in response to the reporting requirements, you're more than welcome to kind of briefly touch on them there. But for the sake of the actual budget template, we don't need to have any information on that. It would just be, for example, if somebody was funding half of a staff wage, you could maybe mention that in there, and that would be something good. Or similar to
Oh,
the example, if somebody was funding for part of your rent space, and so there's someone else there. So,
okay. Yeah, that's helpful. And then, sorry, is it okay if I ask a quick follow-up to that?
yep.
Okay. And then when looking at the actual budget table where you know input your non-capital expenses, I interpreted that as filling in the expenses specifically that I would be, you know, the organization would be requesting that RDN fund, not the total cost. So, you know, just as an example, staff wages, there's only a portion of the staff wages we're saying would be covered through RDN funding. And so it's not kind of the full picture. Is that correct? I'm just inputting exactly what RDN would be funding, or do I need to explain totals or?
No, we would just want you to put in the amount that you're requesting specifically from RDN and Reaching Home. With that said, so when you are doing like for the staff wages, you could put 0.25 next to the person and just kind of explain it briefly in the description that somebody else is funding basically the other portion of the wages and that they are a full-time worker, but for the sake of the Reaching Home funding, that you're just looking for 25% of their wages to be paid through Reaching Home,
I understand.
essentially.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you so much. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know it's a little bit confusing. I hope the example helps when you're completing that. But if you have any questions, by all means, also just reach out and I can
Yeah.
help you further afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you.
Like I'm just seeing a few questions about the recording. So we will make sure that everybody who is here today or was signed up for today's session, that they will be receiving the recording, just so you guys are aware. Oh, sorry, Sydney, I realized that's you actually answering that.
No worries. And I'm just yeah, responding. Sorry to hear, Katie, that you had trouble getting in as well. Yeah, we had a few folks and I had sent out the link that we had on our end because I know Eventbrite can be sometimes a little bit tricky to navigate. Really the only reason why we use it is to prevent Zoom bombing, because if we make this link public, it's greater chances that that will happen. And unfortunately it has happened in the past. So that's why we use Eventbrite, to try and add a protective layer, but we understand it can be yeah, it can be it can pose a bit of a barrier. But yeah, for those of you, yeah, who, sorry, Brandon, did you just say this, that the recording is going to be, yeah, we'll send it out right away tomorrow, because we understand the deadline is Monday, so we'll want to make sure you get the copy of the recording. And for folks who want access even earlier, we actually had recorded our first two information sessions from back in November. It's available on our YouTube. I did not know our organization even had a YouTube. So if you type in, I think it might even be Rural Development Network or Alberta Rural Development Network, it will come up as one of the most recent videos posted, just in case. So yeah, we have a YouTube. Any other questions for folks? Sorry, did I miss anything? Yeah, any other questions from folks before we wrap up? Erica, go ahead.
I know you're going to be sending out the link, but I'm just going to quickly ask this. Um, is basically the only change in the process, the budget for those people who are returning? Because it seems to be pretty simple and the same as before. So I'm like, do I even need to watch the first half an hour that I missed trying to get in?
No, honestly, I would say what is it? The system and everything is very similar. So if you feel comfortable, you definitely don't need to worry about watching it if it's something that you feel comfortable in. I would say it's more if you're just not 100% sure um, what what you're wanting to apply for, if you have any questions or anything. If you just don't feel that confident, I would definitely recommend watching it. But if you feel comfortable based off of everything that's been said, I don't think that it's necessary for you to watch the entire thing. I also think if you have questions, the application guide in general is a really good place just to reference if there is any little pieces that you're looking to take from that. Is that fair, Sydney?
For sure. And I think it's like really the biggest change outside of the budget piece for which is for everybody, is the change in we offered the letter of intent last year, and this year we have specific questions that we're asking current projects to complete. And Bryn had spoken to this a bit earlier, but yeah, essentially we weren't just the board wasn't getting enough information and details in order to make decisions from current projects last time around. And so that's why these types of reflective questions can be really helpful, because it's like, hey, here's what we set out to accomplish. Did we do it? Did we not? These were the challenges. These are the successes. It will be a lot easier for them to evaluate based on how that information was being collected. But that's really the only differences. Everything else, the board continues to keep the call very open. So there's not specific, just like one or two activities that the board's looking to fund. They are very open to seeing what the community needs are and what community projects are being developed. And so that's really nice. There's pros and cons to that because it means that we get a lot more applications and it's harder to kind of narrow down funding decisions. But it's great in the sense that, yeah, you and your community can, dictate what the needs are and put in an application that reflects your needs and priorities. So
Perfect. That answers it perfectly for me. Thank you.
any other questions? And if not, I think we can probably wrap up, Abram. And just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge for the folks who are still on the call, all of the amazing work you're doing in your communities. I know there's a lot of familiar faces, there's a lot of new faces too, which is great. We're really excited to see the applications and the ideas that are going to be put forth for the next call. As you know, we will continue to advocate for increased funding for rural, remote Indigenous communities, especially in Alberta, through this funding, through other funding. Yeah, we just really believe in the work you're all doing, and it's yeah, it honestly is a highlight for our team to get to work with some incredible folks and leaders and community champions like yourselves. So just thank you, and thank you for your time today. And yeah, Britton, was there anything else you wanted to add, or can we proceed with wrapping up and saying goodbye?
No, I think that is probably all. Yeah, looking forward to seeing everyone's applications and hearing more about what's going on in everyone's community. So thank you for coming today and thank you for listening to us.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.